Hey everybody. Yeah, I just wrote a little something kind of talking about the first section of this pamphlet slash book by Nick Armstrong from Little Things, Big Things Grow. I thought was a really a real banger of a text. Covers a lot of ground really shortly, and I think is like really useful for what we're trying to do today. So yeah, um, Nick Armstrong wrote this little pamphlet several years back, and I was surprised to hear that it was written in '08. I thought it was a lot more recent than that. And it's maybe gone by and large underappreciated, underutilized. But its vitality is ever more apparent today. Since the collapse of the ISO, we in the revolutionary left, at least here in America, have been left with a general sense of kind of aimlessness, uncertainty, and just kind of disorientation about how to relate to mass movements, how to relate to working class revolution and working class people. Or yeah, um, the collapse of the ISO was accompanied and maybe spurned on by the growing popularity of social democracy here in the US in the form of the Bernie campaigns and the DSA. Um, Despite its numerical successes, we have seen little, if any, progress towards a social or a socialist reality being offered by the DSA and its weird obsession with relating to the Democratic Party. Like, what is it with those people and the Democrats? Armstrong's pamphlet asks the same question that socialists should always be asking ourselves: What should we do next? And the same tradition of Lenin's "What is to be done," as well as a modest proposal which transformed the world by members of the Seattle and Denver. This question is neither overly mechanistic in its dependence to economic factors and social forces. Neither is the question saturated in relativity and rejects lessons from history. As all tasks of a socialist, this is a dialectical materialist task, taking lessons from the past and the ideas they implemented and doing our best to apply them to our present struggle and its particular challenges, to become students and appliers of revolutionary history. Academic misconceptions of Marx and Engels would have us believe that they were middle-class intellectuals, stuffy and theoretical, as well as emotionally disconnected intellectuals who were stuffy and who were theoretically as well as emotionally disconnected from the working masses. The reality couldn't be more of opposite. Marx and Engels were both academics who tirelessly dedicated their lives to the emancipation of the masses and building an organization of the masses to do just that thing, project of liberation. Nims, somebody who's we've read a couple times, states that Marx was before all else a revolutionist. Fighting was his element, and he fought with a passion, a tenacity, and a success such as few could rival. Two main sources lead to this degradation of the true character of Marx and Marxism: academics who would impress their elitism and self-importance on any thinker from history and prop their own positions as the heads of social change. The issue here being Marx's sharp opposition to ideas changing the world as opposed to practical action. Marx had zero use for academics and their kind of ivory tower theoretics. The second factor being a fabricated distinction between Marx, the pliable thinker, and Lenin, the hard-nosed revolutionary, when in fact Lenin wholly depended on Marx, and Lenin was very much so the logical progression of Marxism, of Marxist thoughts. Even in their own time, Marx and Engels had to prove their revolutionary gall to seasoned fighters. The issue being that the most dominant communist strain in the 1840s was elitist conspiratorial sects that would foment insurrection from the shadows and usher in the communist utopia. This, of course, is in distinct contradiction to the necessary self-emancipation of the working class, theorized by Marx and Engels as socialism from below. Thus, they wrote the Communist Manifesto to provide a roadmap forward on how to go about this project of total human liberation. Kind of funny how even the big old manifesto is also in line with the dialectical task of what should we do next. With its publication and spreading, Marx and Engels established themselves as revolutionary theorists of socialism from below, the distinct self-emancipation of the working class. Marx and Engels laid massive stress on two key lessons. Liberation can never be gifted to the masses from the educated minority of intellectuals, and there is no educating the masses on their suffering. The conditions of capitalism are more than sufficient to elucidate any worker to their own subjugation and counterposed interest to the boss. Marx wrote of the necessity of a working class organization, a party, with which to implement the will of the entire proletarian mass. The infinite fingers of the workers joined into a single fist to defeat the capitalists. This is the task of socialists, to build this organization or this fist. Thus, we come back to the same question. What do we do next? How to build the fist of a working class liberation organization? I'll do my best to explain our analysis of the necessary steps. The immediate contradiction that we come up against is how do we get the masses most subjected to bourgeois ideology to engage in a project of their own liberation as a necessary condition of its success? Workers are constantly subjected to news media, education, slogan, material benefits, culture, and art productions that completely normalizes and advocates for capitalist ideology. From public education to Hollywood, the socialist project is one in direct positioned as directly counterposed to damn near everything that workers are inundated with, whether it be CNN or Fox or whatever you got. Lenin offers the answer to this problem in his strategy of the vanguard, a layer of radicalized workers educated and trained to catalyze the working masses into action, to act as leaven in bread, never to be mistaken for the loaf itself, but a necessary component to cause the bread to rise. Building this layer of what Lenin calls professional revolutionaries is our current task at hand. We use the word cadre to describe Marxist fighters that have dedicated themselves to struggle towards emancipation. The development of this cadre goes three distinct phases: discussion circles, propaganda groups, and then parties or a party. The discussion circle can take many forms, from book clubs to informal yet motivated friend groups to radical sections of workplaces and nonprofits. A discussion circle is merely a place to discuss political ideas. We should be seeking these out at every turn and motivated to advance them further along towards a revolutionary perspective, pushing them as politically far as the discussion groups can go. The second is the propaganda group. After having sufficient discussion to reach an agreement on the revolutionary nature of our political agreements, a group can then begin to publish and recruit. The aim here is to maintain a high level of political agreement with the core members of the discussion group while also issuing out statements, revolutionary in nature, to call out other would-be socialists into organization and regroupment into some collective and coalescing. The key being not to tell people how bad their lives are, they're probably all too aware of that, but to offer an alternative and a means of fighting back. Issuing statements doesn't have to be any specific form. We embrace a diversity of propaganda tactics, from memes to pamphlets to jokes to bullying politicians on the internet, or merely offering a shoulder and ear and hopefully an analysis to your coworkers' hardships. Propaganda publications can take two forms, the general and the concrete. General would be described as general topics about Marxist ideas and analysis on any number of topics. This is what we try to do with our weekly meetings, offering an analysis on current issues to counter the hogwash people are inundated with on a daily basis in bourgeois society, the kind of political narratives that CNN and Fox kind of put out. The second is concrete, pragmatic, or even agitational, to form that analysis into specific calls to action, slogans, or demands. Taking cops or police, for an example, we can issue general propaganda about the history of the police, talking about slave catchers, strike breakers, and class traders. And then we can also talk about the reasons why they murder Black people and brown folks. That would be like a kind of like general propaganda. Concrete propaganda would be issuing demands for disarmament and defunding the police. Slogans like kidnap more cops or jail all killer cops, as well as actions that create concrete steps for generalized propaganda. Organizing protests where Marxist ideas may be shared and received. And then I just had a block quote here from the end of one of Armstrong's paragraphs. But there is more to being a cadre than understanding Marxist politics and being able to argue for those ideas. Cadre must be able to scientifically evaluate the development of the class struggle in society generally, in order to work out how to take advantage of these developments. They must understand and be able to carry out the mechanics of building the organization. They must understand the tactics, the various twists and turns that a propaganda group has to go through to build a mass party. Such a cadre is not trained overnight, nor are they trained without hard work, without an intense effort and theoretical education and the practical tasks of building a socialist organization. At the core of organizational building is maintaining an ideological clarification and a commitment to traditions of revolution. Without this, we build our house on sand. The next task is to grow bigger. I feel like I'm going on a little bit too long, so I'll just touch on like growing bigger or recruitment. Just want to talk about like identifying an audience, identifying your audience. I do know, as much as I hate to say this, I do not think we should be trying to win everyone to socialism. We are not the radicalizing factor. That would be the oppression of capitalism. We need to engage with those who position themselves, like literally at protests, those who position themselves and literally and ideologically against capitalism. That is our audience. Those who identified the violent, disgusting nature of our society and are searching for a mechanism of change, seeking for tools to fight back. It should be a crime not to be actively seeking out those people and offering the solace of a fight back. Wherever there are radicalizing workers, that's where we want to be, offering tools of revolution. And that is all I got.